Now, what is interesting is to take them and relate them to various gifts. What about somebody who's into evangelism who is a D? What type of evangelism style would they have? Are they more directive, confronting? The I's and the S's are more relational, and the C's are your apologetics type people. They're into the details. They give you the intellectual arguments for the faith. So some of these guys, Josh, what's his last name? Yeah. Some of those guys, they're C's, and that's where they live. That's what they do for a living. Now, where this tool can be very helpful to you, and this is what I mentioned earlier, I used to use it for premarital counseling, postmarital counseling, and team building. Does that make sense to you? Well, let me explain. Now, notice across the top, we've got each one rated as to excellent or poor. Then down the side here, what you have is you have a D, somebody who is primarily D, relating to another D. How do they get along? What's their relationship in terms of social interaction and work? Because some people are different in a social context than they are in a work situation. So if you look up here, which two temperaments do not do well together? If they were to get married, it would probably be a disaster. Well, you need to look over here in the far column, go down, and there's your S, social situation, and then you come across, and we're talking about the D and the C together. I was, for a time here in the 80s, God gave me an interim ministry, and I kept going to churches. I would preach for maybe 3 or 4 months, and I'd leave thinking it's over with, and somebody else would come along out of the blue saying, would you come be our interim pastor? So working with the church up in Plano, one of our students was there, one of our guys, and he was there dating a Baylor nurse. So the student, Jonathan, was a D, and she was a nurse. What do you think her temperament was? C, right? You nurses, they pass they got to get it right. Doctors are C, lawyers tend to be C's, all of those things. Your tax person, you want to be a C to get it right. So they were a DC. And I went, oh my word. And it was over there in Walford Student Center on the 3rd floor in one of the counseling rooms up there where I gave it to them. And I looked at that and I said, let me explain to you what this is telling me. And I said, are you having any problems? They said, yeah, lots of them. But they said, but we managed to work them out. We sit down and talk about it. This is before they were married. And so they had asked me to do the service. So I did. Lasted 2 years. Lasted 2 years. Now, there are other things that were problematic, but this didn't help them any because they're so different. Now, also you could take this and your own temperament may be that of a DC, and you're going to struggle with some of these things as well. Now, in a work situation, it's a little bit better, but you can see the problem here in the social situation, family. This is very difficult. And then sometimes you see this where the wife is a D and the husband is a C. And so she pretty well runs the family. That happens often. Now, notice how an S functions. Notice you got an IS, an SS, and an SC. What do you observe about them on this chart?
So they're excellent in the work situation, IS, but fair in the social situation.
Well, yeah, but in general, they can go along with people. So they get along fairly well with people. So here's a D with a D. Fair, good, they get along in a social situation. I think they understand one another. In work, so-so, they're going to have a few problems along the way. Your D and your I, isn't that interesting? In work, but notice how well they get along. Now, what is really interesting is the I with the I. Socially, it's wonderful. Work-wise, forget it. It's a loss. Let me give you an example. Chuck Swindoll and Chaplain Bill Bryan. You don't know Chaplain Bill Bryan. Bill is an off-the-charts I. I mean, he is way out there. And that's the way, that is a good design for a chaplain. And I used to walk by, and he'd be standing, here was his office, and he'd be standing out. They've got an area there where the secretaries are. And he was out there a lot, and I went by one day jokingly. He said, "Bill, get in your office and get some work done." And his response was, "I am in my office." And he was right. That's where he is. He's our beloved chaplain. Anyway, he and Chuck would go off together, and they would take a day off to plan the chapels, because the chaplain is responsible for chapels in which we have speakers and that type of thing. And when they came back in the end of the day, they had accomplished absolutely zero. Zilch. Why? Yeah, but they had a great time and they love each other. So see what happens when an I relates to an I? In terms of social interaction, boy, they had a blast. But in terms of work, they didn't get a thing done. All right? So that's how this chart can be helpful to you. Now, the way I'm using it, I'm not doing weddings anymore. I turn down weddings. That's not my favorite thing. You've heard me say that before. But where I use this now is in teams. And in some cases, the team has already formed. Now, you can use this to form teams, but you can use it to evaluate teams. And that's what I'm doing now. And I run into this, and this tool is so helpful there. So, I know right away if this team has a D and a C on it, that they're probably going to struggle getting along with one another. So what I may do is, after they take this tool, I'll have them take whatever their temperament is, write it on a piece of paper and pin it to their shirt. And then and have them sit in a room like this, and I'd look over and I'd say, "Camellia, who are you going to struggle with in here to relate?" Let's say you're D. All right, and you look around. Well, it's going to be a C, and you look over here, and Brian is a C. He's put it on there, and you can say, "I'm going to struggle with Brian." We already are having our struggles. Well, this says yes. That's what you're going to run into. So again, the S's are going to get along fairly well on the team, but you can get an idea of where the struggles are going to take place on this.